It started with the sound of muffled cries. I was staying at my cousin's place for a week, and that night, I couldn't sleep. Their house was small, so every noise carried through the walls. At first, I thought I imagined it. But then I heard it again. Soft, broken sobs coming from the other side of the house. My cousin's stepson, Michael, was only 12. He was a quiet boy, always keeping to himself. That night, something felt wrong, so I got up to check on him. I didn't knock on his door right away. I stood outside, listening. "Please, don't," his voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. My heart dropped. I pushed the door open, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Michael's stepmother, Kate, was there, sitting on the edge of his bed. She froze when she saw me, her face a mix of anger and panic. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, trying to sound calm but failing. Michael's face was buried in his hands, and his shoulders were shaking. He wouldn't even look at me. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. Kate stood up quickly, blocking my view of Michael. "Of course it is," she said, forcing a smile. "He just had a bad dream, that's all." But the way she said it didn't sit right with me. Her tone was too defensive, too rushed. The next morning, I tried to talk to Michael while Kate was out. He wouldn't say much, just kept shaking his head and avoiding eye contact. But when I told him I was there to help, he broke down. "She comes into my room at night," he said, his voice barely audible. "She says if I tell anyone, she'll make sure I get blamed." I felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over me. This boy had been carrying this nightmare alone, too scared to speak out. I knew I couldn't stay quiet. I went straight to my cousin, Michael's father, and told him everything. At first, he didn't believe me. "Kate wouldn't do something like that," he said, laughing nervously. "You must have misunderstood." But when I pressed, telling him what Michael had confided in me, his face changed. He looked confused, hurt, and then angry. "I need to talk to him," he said finally. When he confronted Michael, the boy broke down again, repeating everything he had told me. My cousin was furious. He didn't even wait for Kate to come home. He packed her things and called the police. The confrontation when she returned was explosive. She tried to deny everything, saying we were all lying, that Michael was making it up to get rid of her. But the evidence was too strong, and her behavior only made her guilt more obvious. The authorities took over, and Kate was arrested. It was a long, painful process for Michael and the family. He started seeing a counselor, and though it took time, he began to heal. Michael's life didn't go back to normal immediately after Kate was taken away. The scars she left weren't just physical. They were emotional, deep, and complicated. He had trouble trusting people, especially adults, and every night, he still struggled to sleep without checking the locks on his door multiple times. My cousin, Michael's father, was consumed with guilt. He kept blaming himself for bringing Kate into their lives, for not seeing the signs, and for being too caught up in work to notice what was happening under his own roof. "How did I miss this?" he'd ask over and over again, as if repeating the question would somehow change the past. One day, I decided to sit with Michael under the mango tree in the yard, where he often sat alone. I didn't want to push him to talk, but I also didn't want him to feel like he was alone. "Do you blame your dad?" I asked gently after a long stretch of silence. He shook his head, playing with the dirt at his feet. "No. I wish he had noticed sooner." His words hit me hard. It wasn't just about what Kate did. It was about the silence that surrounded it, the way her actions were allowed to continue because no one was looking close enough. Weeks turned into months, and Michael slowly started to open up more, both to his father and to me. Therapy helped him find words for feelings he had buried, and school gave him a space where he could just be a kid again. But the road to healing was anything but easy. One day, during one of his sessions, Michael decided to write a letter to himself. His therapist had suggested it as a way to confront the guilt and shame he was carrying, even though none of it was his fault. He let me read it, and I'll never forget what it said. "Dear Michael, this is not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are strong because you survived. You are brave because you spoke out. And you are loved, no matter what anyone tries to tell you. Don't let her lies live in your head anymore. You deserve to be happy, and one day you will be. Love yourself." Reading that letter made me cry. It reminded me how resilient children can be, even in the face of unimaginable pain. Michael was reclaiming his voice, his power, and his sense of self. His story became a cautionary tale in the community. Parents started paying closer attention to their children, asking more questions, and breaking the culture of silence that often surrounds issues like this. It wasn't just about Michael anymore. It was about every child who might be suffering in silence, too afraid to speak up. If there's one thing I want people to take away from this story, it's this: listen to your children. Notice the small changes. Trust your instincts. And never, ever ignore the signs. As time passed, Michael's story became more than just a painful memory for our family. It turned into a rallying cry for change. The whispers in the community, once hesitant and filled with denial, grew louder. People began to share their own stories, often for the first time. Mothers and fathers who once brushed aside their children's fears began asking questions they had never dared to before. "Are you okay? Do you feel safe at home? Is there anything you want to tell me?" I'll never forget the day Michael stood in front of his school assembly to share his story. He was only 13, but he spoke with a strength and wisdom far beyond his years. "My name is Michael," he began, his voice shaking at first but growing steadier with each word. "And I want to tell you something important. If someone hurts you, even if they say it's your fault, it's not. You are not to blame. And you deserve to be safe." The room was silent, except for a few muffled sobs. Teachers, students, and even parents had gathered to hear him speak. He ended with words I'll never forget. "Please, don't stay quiet. Tell someone. Even if it feels scary, even if you think no one will believe you, tell someone. Because you matter." That day, 2 students came forward to their teachers, revealing things they had been too afraid to say before. One of them, a shy girl named Temi, had been suffering in silence for years. Her story broke my heart all over again, but it also proved that Michael's courage was sparking change. As a family, we worked hard to create a safe environment where Michael could heal. His father attended parenting workshops, learning how to better communicate and rebuild trust. I stayed close, becoming a second home for Michael whenever he needed a break. Kate's actions left scars, yes, but they also became the catalyst for a much-needed reckoning in our community. One afternoon, Michael came to me with a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. He held up a drawing he had been working on, a picture of a boy standing under a bright sun, surrounded by people holding hands. "That's me," he said, pointing to the boy. "And those are all the people who helped me. You, Dad, my therapist, my teachers. Everyone." I choked up. "It's beautiful, Michael. Just like you." The years went by, and Michael grew into a confident young man. He never forgot what happened, but he didn't let it define him, either. He used his story to advocate for other children, speaking at events, volunteering with organizations, and inspiring countless people along the way. His message was always the same: every child deserves to feel safe. Every child deserves to be believed. And every child deserves to heal. Today, Michael is studying psychology, hoping to become a counselor for children who faced abuse. He wants to be the kind of person he needed when he was younger. Someone who listens, believes, and fights for their safety. His journey wasn't easy, and the scars will never fully fade. But his story reminds me of something my grandmother used to say: From the deepest wounds can grow the strongest roots. So to all the parents out there, I beg you, don't wait until it's too late. Pay attention. Speak up. Protect your children. Because no child should ever have to feel the kind of pain Michael endured. And no parent should ever have to live with the guilt of missing the signs.